I'm going to talk about this boilerplate that I created for Flask applications, because every single time, well, okay, let's backtrack. I work at Custom Made. I work as a platform data engineer, so a lot of what I do is just building APIs for services that we have that do things. And so we use Flask for REST APIs, and every time I start a new one, I do the same things over and over again. And by now I just kind of have this little pattern. So I figured, why not open source it and people can use it. And so, I lay out the project structure and set up virtual env requirements and hook up common modules and stuff. And so I open source this. And if you go over here, you can actually see it. So this is actually going to be a hands-on. So I'm going to now build a mini REST API with this so you guys can see what it's like to use Flask. And hopefully I'll show off some of the features that I have in this boilerplate. So, okay. If you guys want to follow along, by the way, every single thing that's in here is like pullable. So, first thing I'm going to do is to go to the Flask chassis website and clone the URL. Okay, so this is gonna install some stuff and download some packages automatically. Meanwhile, I can show you kind of what this whole thing looks like. So it's pretty simple. You have your test cases, your views, your models, bunch of test factories, manage.py, which is kind of like the Django manage.py but uses Flask script, run server if you use some other kind of external server to run things, and then in this directory are a bunch of other things. So env is like the virtual env, and conf contains config files, and so it's like already partially ready to go. So when this is done, I will start coding. So meanwhile, I can take you through kind of like what this thing has. So it uses the app factory model, which comes in pretty handy, where you don't just instantiate an app object, we have a function that creates one. So you can pass in config options. So when you're testing things, that comes in pretty handy. You might want to like pass different configuration options depending on different situations, and want to instantiate different versions of the application and stuff. It's hooked up to having its own virtual env, and it kind of if you change something in requirements, it like figures it out when you run the make script, and it'll reinstall it, and just a bunch of little niceties. Makefile for common tasks. Yes, I use makefiles. I guess you can use something else. Also, so Flask RESTful is what I use. Also caching and debugging and profiler middleware, and all this like little stuff that you can add or remove at will. Okay, so it looks like it's up. So actually, here, let me show you this thing. So basically,
can you bump up the font?
Oh yeah, totally. Does that look a little better? Okay. So it turns out this is a cat API, and you can, no, this does not work. And you can actually, look at different cats. But I actually want to build something better than this, obviously. So what I was going to do is, there is, a pretty common demo is the Backbone.js demo, where you have a little to-do app, and you can, check things off and all this. So I was thinking, but this uses local storage as a backend, so I figured, why not make a little Flask app that does this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I'm just going to, I basically have the HTML files and JavaScript, like the front end part of it, already all set to go. So I'm just going to pull that in here. Actually, I pulled that in the wrong place. There we go. So now I have all the static files in, and so how do we pull this into the Flask app? So the chassis already comes with, just like a demo thing that you can fiddle with and change around. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have another view that just shows you the to-do app. So I'll have a view just for the single page, and then I'll have an API that looks like this. So need to import render template. So basically what render template does is it takes a template file, runs it through Jinja, and returns it in the request. So one thing I do have to do is to hook that up over here. So basically what I'm saying here is take the URL slash and use the function show to-dos in there. And so obviously I have to import it. Okie doke, so let's see if this worked. What did I do? All right. Okay. So, I'm going to do this thing where I look at my little cheat sheet. Oh, right. That's what is going on. Okie doke. So and here's Flask Debug Toolbar, which is an excellent extension if you guys ever need it. But so right now we have, well, let me pop up the inspector and we can see what's going on. So I can add things, but obviously the request that it's making is failing because the API isn't there. So now we're going to start building that API. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to pretend this API existed, and I'm going to just stick some dummy JSON in there so you can kind of see like what this would actually look like. So I'll call this to-do API, and remove this, and don't need this for now, and don't have a cat ID, or I'll call this to-do list API even. So it would look like something like this. So it has a title. Oh hey, and then it has a, I think it was called done. Turns true. And then it also has an order because things in your to-do list come in a certain order. Okay, and then obviously I got to hook that up in here. So I call this to-do list API, and this, instead of being in /cats, it'll be /todos, and to-do list API right there. Okay. And there we go. So this is kind of what it will look like, but obviously we want to do more than returning just dummy JSON, right? So I'll start actually building the models. So I'll stick a new model. So instead of, we don't need cats, but what we actually need is to do. So I'm just going to copy this. So to do extends the base model, and I'm going to nuke this and call this table to do. And it has a title, and the title's a string, and it's the primary key, which is actually terrible, but for the for the sake of this, it kind of works. I'm not going to change the front end so that, you know. So the order is not a primary key. It's an integer. And there's also a done, which happens to be a Boolean, I believe. Okay, so that looks like a kind of functional model, and bam, so we got our model right here. So it's already created. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a factory, because factories help test things, and you should always test your things. So I'm going to copy this over here and call this a to-do, and it's models.todo, and use the DB session. And so the title, so Faker is this cool library that generates fake data for you, and I love doing that in my factories because it looks real. So I can do faker.bs, which is my favorite Faker function, which you'll see what it does in a second. Title, what else do we got? Order, which is factory.sequence should actually work fine, so we can generate them one by one, and so just return the number because order is a number anyway. And then let me see what do we get. Oh, whether it's done or not. Factory.sequence. And then I can just do faker.boolean. Boolean? Okay, I'm hoping that actually exists. So what this gives me is now I can do bam. Okay, so now I have 10 different, wait, how did that work? Okay, I got to actually fiddle with this function here. So actually, first of all, right, so this factory is still generating cats, so we got to change it to generate to-dos. M.title. Okay, so we actually have a bunch of tasks now. And so the question is now, how do we stick these tasks into our to-do list API? So I would do something like this. To-do dot. So now that we have a bunch of dummy things in the database, to-do dot. What was the syntax? Query dot get, I think. Yeah. Or here, I'll do to-do dot query dot all. Or here, I'll do this. Okay, and so in an ideal world, I do return to-dos, cut this out, and then I'd, let's see, make dev, running. Okay, so it turns out that actually didn't work. And the reason is you can't just magically serialize SQL Alchemy models into JSON. So Flask RESTful provides you with this like nice serialization model thing, which I really, really wish would take a cue from the SQL Alchemy model, but it doesn't yet. And there's a bunch of other libraries that do it, but it's a lot more work to get them to work, so I'm going to use this. So what this is saying is take the to-do field and convert it into a string, and take the done field and turn it into a Boolean, and then take the, what was the other one? Order field and turn it into a integer. Oh, good point. Okay, thanks. That's actually really helpful. If you can catch stuff before it actually errors, that'll save me time. And then this isn't cat fields, this is to-do fields. Okay. So now I can stick marshal with here, which is a nice little decorator that does the marshalling for you when you return the object. And stick to-do fields in there. And, okay, nothing broke. Something broke. Oh, right. To-do. Bam. Okay, so we can now innovate collaborative models. Check. Anyway, so the other missing part here is that the post isn't working. So obviously, if I check this and then I refresh, boom, it's like not checked anymore because it didn't actually, do anything. So that's the second part of what I'm going to stick in here. So if I just nuke this and I'll stick a post in here. And for this, let's see, what am I going to do? So post is going to send me a JSON object, and then, okay. So to do JSON equals request.json. So basically, get the JSON, and then to do dot query dot get to do JSON dot title. So see if it's there. Try to pull it. And then, if to do is none, then I would just create a new one. So to do equals to do. And then I do to do dot, title equals to do JSON title. And ideally, I wouldn't have to do any of this by hand either, which there's a great library for that. But again, it takes a while, so I will show you what it is later. Okie dokes, and then all I need to do is add it to the SQL Alchemy session, and then db.session.commit that session. Undefined name DB. Well, that's kind of interesting. Oh, right, okay. Okay. So, now when I check this, there's an internal server error. Request not defined. Okay, so from Flask import requests. Do not do this. Please nicely order your imports. Okay. Oh, okay, so it posted. So I checked this, and I refresh, and it's still checked. And bam. So we have a to-do app. Do we have time so I can show you a few more niceties? If not, then don't worry about it. Okay, I'll make it like super quick. There is, okay, so there's make tests, which runs coverage.py and knows and everything, and it's really sweet. There's make docs, which runs Sphinx and pulls it, and look at this cute little icon. And you can click on this REST API reference thing, which is actually auto-generated from the comments in the REST API, because Flask RESTful is awesome and will do that for you. And so this is really neat when you're working with other people and you can be like, hey, this is what the API does. What else? I guess you can. Oh, okay. The other neat thing is make shell, which drops you into kind of like a Django-like shell, and you have models dot to do and all that stuff, and it's kind of nice to fiddle with, and it's IPython. It's neat. Yeah, I'd encourage you to take a peek into the feature list here, see if anything strikes your fancy. If you want to see anything changed, please submit pull requests. I would love to merge them in. There's a lot to be changed. But yeah, I think that's it.
Great. Any questions from Ollie other than what he takes in the morning to be so brave to do this live enough on stage? Freedom.
Does Flask Talks include any like authentication stuff? Like is that part of boilerplate?
No. Like usually what I use this is purely for REST APIs, and I guess sometimes you would need authentication for that, especially if it's an external API, but usually like I never had to do that. But if you stick that in there, I would love to pull it in.
Other Slayer?
What about reading?
Well, now I know what's at. That's a fair point. Again, like because these aren't like outside exposed, I've never had to do that, but yeah, good point.
Other questions? All right, thank you.